I remember having this moment where I was just so angry at God. Like, if Chrissy was the most excited person in the room, if she loved you so much, why did you take her?
Love Gangster with Adrien Boyel.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Love Gangster. I'm Adrien Boyel, your host, and today I have a special episode with a very special guest. I want to jump into it. This is actually one of my closest friends, somebody that I've been friends with for many, many years now at this point, somebody I look up to, that I respect, somebody that they say you wouldn't want to switch places with somebody and take advice from. This is actually somebody I've taken advice from on many occasions in my life because he is an amazing man with a strong and firm foundation in the Lord, which is a big part of my life and the things that I run my filter through. He's a real estate agent. He's an entrepreneur, what I would consider a social impact entrepreneur, and does a lot of work within the church community and outside the church community, and just super humbled and grateful to have him on my show today. So without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce Mr. Brandon Leone.
Thanks for having me, dude.
Thanks for coming, brother.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, excited to be here.
This last minute schedule, I had an issue happen yesterday with Sunny and my recording with her. And so I was like, I need help. And there we go, Brandon to the rescue, like always.
Let's go.
That's right. For those that don't know who you are, give a brief introduction of who you are, what you do, and why you do it.
Been in real estate for 13 years. I've had every job you could imagine, everything from retail to restaurants. I grew up, my dad taught me work ethic, so I always had 2 or 3 jobs at one time, but now just, full-time real estate, between residential real estate, investing, involved heavily in my church, as he had said. I have 4 boys, and 11, 8, 6, and 3.
Oof.
And yeah, so 4 boys, crazy life. I've been married for 13 years. And to my wonderful wife, Vanessa, who I love very much. And she is a worship director at our church. And we get to travel around with a ministry called Agape Freedom Fighters, where we're able to just empower people to live their best life for God. So it's a busy life.
Busy life.
Yeah.
One thing I've always loved about you is not just your intentionality, which we'll talk more about in a few minutes, but your level of care and compassion and interest in serving others. Where does that stem from for you?
That is a loaded question.
Yeah.
What I would say is it all really started from my core memory. Like, everybody has core memories in their life. And, my first memory I can ever remember was a traumatic one, which really shaped my life. But the first memory I ever had was a knock on the door. And I remember I was watching Ninja Turtles, just living my best life at 5. And my mom was working to some Jane Fonda tape, workout tape, like the high socks and the long shirt. And there's a knock at the door, and it was loud, it was abrupt, and I just remember the door opening, and there was a guy there in a uniform I hadn't seen before. He had a hat, and he just had this wide-eyed look on his face, and I'm behind my mom, just wondering what's going on, and he just says, "Man, there's been an accident." And so she said, "What happened?" And he says, "Is this your daughter?" And he moves out of view, and all I can see is my 7-year-old sister lying there, crushed in the street, got ran over by a school bus in front of our house. And I believe I've shared a little bit of this story with you, but
A little bit.
But the core memory, right, of like your first memory of a knock on the door being your memory.
Wow.
And the screech, like the sound, the yell, the wail of my mom running out there, what I saw, like, imagine what that does to a 5-year-old. So that really shaped my life. And I lost a lot of my childhood because my family was devastated. My sister had died. My 7-year-old, she was 7. My 9-year-old sister was on the bus when it happened, when it ran her over. So she looked back and everything that she's had to deal with through that. So a lot of trauma has shaped my childhood. And I decided that I was going to grow up at 5 years old emotionally, that I was going to be there for my family, and I didn't know this at the time. It wasn't until years later that I really understood that I had this gift to feel people's emotions, to understand what was going on. And I would feel their emotions, and I just thought it was normal. I thought everyone felt it. So I would feel all this sorrow and this anguish and this pain. And so I would just try to do everything I could to make my parents and my sister feel better.
Yeah.
So I was, the good kid. I didn't get in trouble. I did everything I could to make sure that they were happy.
Wow.
And that translates into the rest of my life. that my happiness revolved around taking care of others.
Yeah.
And, through various training and through all these different things, when I started really unpacking it, like I was the caretaker. Like that's what I did.
Wow.
I took care of other people. I put other people's needs before myself. And my parents are great. Like I still had a great childhood, but like I lost the boyhood, the childhood that I got robbed in a way.
Yeah.
But I don't see it as a negative thing anymore because of the lives that I've been able to impact by sharing my story, by helping people that have had loss.
Yeah.
And really just taking ownership. I believe that everyone has gifts, talents, and abilities that they were born with that only they have, that the Lord has given them. And my sister was no exception. So, so I feel like I've she was, if you were to look at any pictures of my sister, her name was Chrissy, if you were looking at any pictures of her, she was the happiest person in the room at all times. She was always smiling. She was always singing. She was always happy.
Wow.
And so I just try to have that piece of her with me. And that's really what birthed kind of a big part of our ministry. And it's called Inner Healing.
Yeah.
And it basically, we're able to help people through traumatic things that happen in their lives. We're able to invite Jesus into them, into the memories, and help them find healing. And so that's how it started for me, where I was healed of that first memory of all the trauma I had behind it. And not to get too deep into it, but it really shaped my life to really realize how much of my life was impacted from that one situation, that one occurrence, that one situation, that one thing that happened.
Wow.
And how it's affected my family's lives. That's right. And how I've been able to have an impact because of it. Because if I would have just had a normal life and grown up with a family normal, I may not be able to make the difference I can make now.
That's incredible. I actually remember some of the details of that. I knew she had passed. I didn't remember the knock at the door and that whole part of it. And what's interesting to me is like I had that very similar situation at 4 years old, but I was actually there to watch him pass, right? My grandfather, watching him die at 4 years old in front of me from alcohol, which created a huge, value in me against alcohol. Same thing with drugs because of the situation with my mom and my upbringing there. And so our biggest voids, which the loss of a sister and the loss of a grandfather, right? Big parts of your family and, your life, those things created some of our biggest values. And we like to do deep. I know you said we don't go too deep, but we do deep here whether it's conversations or relationships, friendships. And that's the one thing I've always enjoyed about you. So kind of take me in from that moment forward. And I know you said you did great in school. Where did your faith and all that, your faith walk come into play?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that I always knew God existed. Mm-hmm. I always knew there was a God. I always believed in God, but never really served him. So I had a moment in high school where I realized that I was angry at God. I had got talked into going to this church camp, and I went, and I had to be like a sophomore in high school, and maybe even a freshman, can't remember, but I remember having this moment where I was just so angry at God, like if Chrissy was the most excited person in the room, if she loved you so much, like why did you take her?
Yeah.
Why did she have to die? Right. And so that was a tough moment I had. And the craziest thing about religion or spirituality, or however you want to look at it, you don't always get the answers.
It's true.
But you have to know that Jesus is with you in the highs, in the lows, in the good seasons, in the bad. And I just felt his presence with me, and I was just able to forgive the Lord. I was holding this grudge against the Lord. I was able to forgive him and able to forgive myself, mm-hmm. because there's a part of me that thought that, if I wasn't so needy, mm-hmm. right? Because before 12 years old, logic isn't fully developed in your brain.
Yeah, for sure.
So as a kid, I automatically thought it was my fault. Like I had something to do with it, right?
Wow.
So learning that now and knowing that now has made a huge difference. But I remember radically giving my life to the Lord around that age and coming back to school, and nobody was serving the Lord. There was nothing going on. Mm-hmm. There were no big youth groups or anything to go to. So I just kind of fell back into my old patterns.
Yep.
And it wasn't until I was 25 years old.
Whoa.
I'm 41 now. It wasn't until I was 25 that I got out of a rough relationship. And I remember just being in a tough place. Like, have any of you ever been in a hard place where you're like, I'm depressed, I'm in debt, like I don't know what to do, right? Like just all the things, right?
Yeah.
Having those suicidal thoughts, just being in a low place.
Yep.
And I remember getting on my knees and saying, Lord, I know you're real, but I don't feel you. Like, tell me what to do.
Yeah.
And I heard an audible voice.
Whoa.
Yeah, heard an audible voice. I knew it was him. Like, I knew it was him. It wasn't even a question. It's not like, is that you? Is that in my head? No, I heard an audible voice.
Yeah.
And it said, go to church. Super stern. And I said, and I just automatically was like, I've been to church.
Yeah.
And then he said, go to church. He said it again. I said, well, I've gone to church and I haven't felt you there. Like, I'm not going to fake it.
Yeah.
And he says, go to church 3 times.
3 times.
And then I say, well, I don't have anyone to go with. And he says it a 4th time. So I'm like, okay.
Wow.
So I call up my ex-girlfriend, my ex-girlfriend's sister and her husband at the time. I say, hey, I don't have anyone to go with me to church. Can you just go sit with me?
Yeah.
And they said, sure. And I walked into the building that day, into the church building. I've gone to that church several times before, and I felt this electricity surging through my body. And it's unlike anything I can even explain. And I know you felt it, but I felt the presence of God. And at the time, I had no grid for it. I didn't know what was going on, but I felt this presence, tangible presence, and it wouldn't leave me. And I was like shaking. And I remember the message. I don't remember anything really about the message that the pastor spoke, but at the end, he gives what's called an altar call. Like, he gives a chance for people that if they want to know the Lord, he gives them a chance to meet them, And he starts reading my mail. He's like, you've been depressed, you're in debt, you just got out of a tough relationship. He just reads my mail and you don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Like, give your heart to the Lord. So I said, okay, So, I was living, a rough life at the time. I was hurting, making a lot of bad decisions. And, I don't feel great saying this, but like at the time I was so hurt. I was dating like 4 girls at one time. And it was just, I remember having this moment when I left the church and I just called every single one of them. And I said, no, this makes no sense, but I found God. So like, have a great life. I wish you the best. I'm out.
Wow.
And that's when I really made that shift, the shift.
That's
where
a big decision.
I stopped, like I wasn't really a huge partier, like going out and everything, but like I would work every weekend. I was bartending and serving. So I was always working. So I didn't have a chance to go out as much as other people. Yeah. But I stopped going out. I stopped drinking for quite a while. I just, every time the church doors were open, I started going to church. And that's when I really just solidified my relationship with God. But it wasn't like, I had a relationship, but there's still a lot of healing that needed to take place. There's still a lot of identity, and I needed to understand in myself, about myself, on how to be a son. Yeah. Right? And a lot of times how we see our earthly father is how we see our heavenly father. So at the time how I saw my earthly father, it was hard for me to have that connection, with the Lord. Of course. And so it was several years that went by until I really, really understood my identity. I started operating the gifts, started seeing people healed, started seeing lives changed.
That'll make you a strong believer.
Yeah. So.
Well, there's a few things I want to unpack there that I think is really neat. One of the things you said that stood out to me, and I've heard this about a month or 2 ago from somebody, and I really I felt for this person. I resonated with this person because I think that I think it's a majority. I feel like people like myself and you are a little bit of the exception to the rule versus the general rule. I know a lot of people who go to church, who do worship, who go through the motions, try to follow the 10 commandments, read their Bible, do all that stuff, but have straight up told me that they never have felt the presence of God. From your perspective and lens of being all the way from probably conservative Christian all the way up to evangelical and everything in between, and kind of having all those different seasons of your life, how do you explain, or how do you put together somebody pursuing God, loving God, maybe even getting baptized, but not ever feeling the presence of God? What is that?
Everybody has their own relationship with God. It's kind of like if we were to have a plate of cookies in front of us and you had 10 people in the room, everyone would have a different experience on how that cookie tastes. The relationship with God is unique for everyone. And sometimes there are things in the way of that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there's, the spirit of religion. Sometimes it's upbringing. Sometimes it's fear. I mean, there's so many things that can be in the way of feeling and experiencing God. And I can't begin to unpack or know what it is for specific people. But I do have lots of conversations with people that say things like that, like I haven't experienced. Given the opportunity, they can. And I've had people that have never experienced, and I just said, hey, let me pray for you. Would you mind? They said, sure. And then they feel the presence of God.
Wow.
So I'm not anyone special or doing anything special. Like, I just believe that he wants a relationship with every single person on this earth.
That's right.
He wants to see them succeed more than they want to succeed. And he wants to use their gifts to make the world a better place. So, it's hard. It's hard when you're going through the motions, or when I say going through the motions, when you're reading your Bible and following 10 Commandments and going to church. But there's so much more than the law of Christianity. And so, like, sometimes people get caught in doing. So there's like this concept, doing versus being.
That's right.
Right. And so I think that's where people get tied up. They're like, if I do more, then I can be more.
I'll be more favored. I'll be more this. I'll be more blessed.
Right. And I think that's probably the key of what people are experiencing, where I'm a good person. So if I do this, then my relationship with God will be better. Maybe he'll love me more. Maybe I'll have more approval from my Father. Maybe. And the truth is, like, your identity comes from the Lord. But if you look at Jesus's life, when his ministry was from 30 to 33 years old, and when he was 30, he went to his cousin, John the Baptist, and he said, hey, like, I want you to baptize me in the water. And he baptizes him, and he comes out of the water, and Jesus says, voice from heaven, Jesus says, this is my son who I am well pleased. Now, he said that, and Jesus had done no miracles at that point. So that would make me believe that
there's no performance.
There's no performance. He loved his son, whether he did anything or not.
Wow.
And those of you that have kids, you know what, how much you love your children.
Yeah,
how much
true.
That love is unconditional. And that proves that he loves him no matter what. But a lot of times we get caught in this triangle between, obedience, right? Our identity and our obedience and the law and it just, it's hard. It's hard to watch people do that. And the only reason why I can see it is because I've gone through it myself. Yeah. More times than one. It's not like you go through it once and you're like, hey, I got my identity locked down. And I mean, it's a constant process.
It's a process. Well, I think that God also, I don't know what quote in scripture it is, but talks about the posture of our heart, right? He knows the posture of our heart. And I think, and this is kind of a theme that's been happening for the last few weeks, is I've seen a lot of people in my life that have faded away for one reason or another in this season of abundance and reaping a huge harvest. And I was asking the Lord, like, why is this happening? And I feel like the posture of their heart was to be a taker, not to be a giver. And, I feel like if you were to ask the Lord how you can have a deeper relationship and actually pursue the Lord, not for your gain, but for strictly just the relationship, I feel like there could be some breakthroughs in that approach versus just being like, I want to have a relationship with God so I can get more favor and I can get more this and I can be in tune with the Creator and he can give me all the downloads I need to be able to get the things I want, right? And I think there's a lot of people out there that are inherently selfish and self-serving in their relationship with God. And so I don't think that God obviously hides himself from people, but I think people hide themselves. They do that to themselves,
Well, look at what's been modeled.
That's right.
So you can't give what you don't have. And so if you grew up around a family of takers, or that's what you've seen, that's what's been modeled for you to get ahead through movies, through social media, through music.
Yep.
That's what's going to be prevalent in your life. So
that makes sense. Kind of speeding things up to, your walk and changing and doing ministry. You were going to church, doing that. How did that transition into Agape Freedom Fighters and The Rock? And that's the piece that I never got to fill in our relationship, is like, how did you go from kind of doing your thing in church 25 to all of a sudden now you're doing ministry and Freedom Fighters and leading and when I met you, you were like, I'm a bishop. And I'm like, how the heck do you even become a bishop, right? So there's so many different aspects that are still cloudy for me. I would love to know, like, how did that whole walk change and your passion for ministry grow?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to a church that was really focused on saving people. It was like every service, it was the evangelist out there, like give your life to the Lord. But then there was no relationship after that. There was nothing to move them to the next level. It was like get saved and then serve, and that was it. And so I found myself going to this church for a long period of time and not having any real deep relationships. And I would serve. I was working probably 20, 30 hours a week at this church, unpaid.
Wow.
And working in youth, and I just got completely burnt out. And the leadership said some things that were very hurtful, and I had to get some healing through church, which that's
church hurt is real.
Yeah, a lot of problems come through that.
Yep.
And I basically came to a point to where I said, I've experienced God at this church, but I think that I need to find a new one. I think that I need to get away from this toxic environment. And so I went to another local church, The Rock, and me and my wife at the time, she was pregnant, which prompted the move because it's like, okay, it's our first child. And then we ended up going over to The Rock and realizing that was our home. And the thing is, like, everybody develops patterns in their life that they will repeat if they don't see the hurt that it's created, if they don't move in a different direction. And so
that's right.
All I knew how to do was serve. So my wife had the joke that I was the yes man. Like everything, I would say yes to everything because I would help everyone.
That's right.
Right? Over myself.
I know that feeling.
And so that was a problem. And so as soon as I got to the church, it was like, how can I serve? So I asked the pastor out to coffee. I said, hey, how can I do to serve? He's like, wait, hold on. Let me hear your story. Like, what's going on? I tell him my story. He's like, hold on. You're not going to serve for at least 6 months. And I'm like, no way. I can't do that. Like, I got gifts. Like, I have to be used. And he's like, no, I just want you to be a churchgoer. And that was a hard 6 months for me.
Yeah, I bet.
To just go. And that's really when I met a friend of mine, Brian, who taught me about identity. And we would meet at Wednesday with a couple guys at Starbucks at like 5:30 a.m. on Wednesdays. And he just broke down identity for me. And I learned a lot about who I was, how I saw God, how I saw myself. And that helped kind of shift my focus. And so from there, I got involved in some ministry here and there. And I love praying for people. But at the time, I had another friend of mine, Adam, who was just really going after the supernatural. When I say supernatural, I mean like healing and miracles and things like that you would hear or see on TV. And he would always challenge me and be like, oh, hey, have you heard this testimony? And have you seen this? And he says, Jesus culture is coming to the area from Reading. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. I want to go there. But I never felt peace to leave The Rock. I just always felt like I needed to stay. Yeah. And so he starts going to Jesus culture. He starts getting all fired up. He's like, I'm going to start a men's group, and we want to, we're gonna meet Friday mornings. And so he would call me over to this men's group, and he got me excited. Yeah. He got me excited about just the thought of, wow, people being healed and supernatural things happening. And right around that time, like, he's just going after hardcore, and I'm just riding his coattails in a way. And he's hyping me up. And right around that time, there was Lou Engle, who's an evangelist that basically like sold his house and rented out Azusa, a Coliseum in Orange County. That's right. And there was like 110th anniversary of Azusa Street Revival. So there was like 110,000 people in the stadium. We went there, and I remember.
Was that the Call?
No, it wasn't the Call.
It was before the Call.
No, right? It was Azusa Street Revival.
Oh, okay. Okay, there you go.
It was called Azusa Now.
Got it.
But we go out there, tons of people, and and this is one of the turning points in my life. I think this is where everything changed for me. Okay. This is before Agape and everything. This is like one of those things that you remember, like so many details. So they were asking for healing with 110,000 people. And they're like, hey, if you have pain, in your shoulder, like lift your hands. I mean, all this stuff. And I remember Vanessa had an injury, my wife, where she couldn't go past here with her right arm. And she's praying, and then all of a sudden, boom, she just gets healed. And we're like, what? You know, because
Wild.
I think we had heard of healings, but I don't think I'd ever like physically seen one right next to me.
Let alone bought into it.
Yeah, and it was like, wow. And then this guy, Sean Bowles comes out, and I had never heard of him, didn't know who he was, but he walks out, and like, I'm the skeptic, okay?
Yeah.
Like, if any of you are with me, if I watch a magic show, I'm looking so close to be like, I'm gonna figure out how he's doing that sleight of hand. Like, I want
same way.
I want to call him out.
Yeah.
And so this guy walks out with his phone, and he just looks at his phone. He's like, hey, and he's got a microphone, 100 plus thousand people. Hey, is there Stan and June Smith in the house? And I'm like, what? He's looking at his phone, calling out somebody.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it's someone like 15 rows up, close to us in our section, and we're in a stadium.
Yeah.
And they go, yeah. And then he goes, does Winding Way mean anything to you? And they're like, yeah. And then he's like, he just starts like naming off all these things. And I'm like, what is this guy doing?
Yeah.
What is this?
Yeah.
And everything he was saying, this couple was like, yes, yes, yes. And then he just like, he basically puts his phone down and he says, the Lord is calling you to mentor sons and daughters and this and that. And he starts speaking into how the Lord saw them and their future and what they were going to do.
That's right.
And the difference they were going to make. And I was just like, who is this guy to say what the Lord? Yeah, right.
That's right.
And then they're crying and I'm like, okay, this guy is, in my mind, okay, he looks on social media, you know, whatever, it's planted, who knows?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's just who I am.
Of course.
Skeptic. And then he calls out another person, but he says, hey, does this number, and he gives a phone number, and this guy's like, yeah, this is my phone number. This guy raises his hands and he starts talking about the guy's separation with his wife and that he's in the music industry and that the Lord wants to use him, and he gets wrecked. And then, and then he calls someone else out, and it's just like, I mean, you name it, the weirdest phone numbers, bank account numbers, like crazy stuff, like insane. And it was about the third person that the Lord spoke to me. Like, I didn't hear a voice this time, but like I felt the presence of God. I knew what it felt like at that point.
Yep.
And it was just like, this is real.
Undeniably real.
Wow, like, Lord, you want these people to be singled out in front of everyone. You want them to know how much you love them.
That's right.
That you're gonna bring someone along to speak into their life for you. Like, what? And I just lost it. Like, and then afterwards, every single person that was just, that every life has changed, I just lost it. And I was like, it's stunned, almost stunned, like the whole way home.
Speechless.
And I just remember a prompting that like, wow, you're going to do this. And I was like, okay. So on the way home, I had no idea who Sean Bowles was. On the way home, we just checked out every YouTube video we could of, and this is 2016. Yeah. So this is 8 years ago. We checked out every YouTube video we could on Sean Bowles to learn it. We bought his book, we did everything.
Wow.
And I'm just a doer. Like, if I feel like the Lord's telling me something, and I think that's why it's been easier for me than some other people, because if it's from the Lord, I don't really care what anyone else thinks. I kind of made a deal with them. I'm like, if you tell me to tell someone something, if you have a word, what we call a word for someone, it's called a word of knowledge.
That's right.
If you have a word of knowledge for somebody, then, and you want me to share it, I don't care where I am, I don't care who it is, I'll do it.
Yep.
And I've stuck to that.
It's an obedient thought.
And and it makes it easy because it takes me out of the equation, because the less I'm in it, the more God's in it.
That's right.
So it's been pretty cool. And so I would just start learning how to hear from the Lord. I would go to a coffee shop. I would go to Whole Foods. I would go anywhere. And I'd just be like, okay, Lord, how do you want to love that person?
And as each one, what I noticed in doing that myself, after each one that I do, they start to happen more and more and more frequently. And then it gets to the point where it's like I almost felt like at one point I'm like, okay, this is a lot. Like, everywhere I go, everywhere I talk, everybody I talk to, almost so many people I see. And then it got really weird where, like, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, where like for like an entire week, everybody I looked at, I knew. Like, I couldn't tell you their name, couldn't tell you where I knew them from, but they all looked familiar. And I was like, what is happening to me right now?
Yeah. I can't say that that's, I mean, everyone experiences the Lord, hears the Lord differently, but
Mm-hmm.
I have had similar occurrences where I knew things about people that I knew no one else knew.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens often. But the way that I look at it, like all the gifts that the Lord gives you specifically,
Mm-hmm.
like he's not going to take them back. They're your gifts. You get them
That's
whether
right.
you use them for him or someone else. But there is sort of an on-off switch,
Mm-hmm.
and you can choose not to engage.
That's right.
Right. So, funny story actually, when we were giving Vanessa, she'll probably be mad at me for sharing this, but when we were giving birth to which child was it? Was it our last child? Was it Micah? It might have been Ezra. So either Micah or Ezra. I don't even remember. We were in the hospital. No, it was COVID, so I had to be Micah.
Okay.
Okay. Giving birth to Micah. The doctor comes in. I just get this overwhelming sense that I'm going to pray for her, and I'm like, man, like we're just trying to give birth to our fourth child. Like,
Yeah.
you know, but I told him, I said, I have a deal. Like, if you tell me.
Yep.
And she comes in and is checking on her. And of course, we had trouble with all 4 of our pregnancies. So like, kind of, we're a little on edge, and we had to wear masks at the time. So it was really hard. But she comes in a couple times, and I see this picture of her, which I often see when I pray for people. I just say, Lord, how do you want to love that person?
Yeah.
You know, how would you like them to be loved today?
Yeah.
And I saw a picture of her basically with all these children, holding all these children, holding all these babies. And it was just really beautiful. And it was in a third world country. It was beautiful.
Whoa.
And so right after she gives birth to Micah, you know, she delivers him and she's in there. And I think there might be like 1 or 2 other nurses in there. And I'm like, hey, this might seem totally out of left field, but have you ever thought about going overseas? And she's like, well, yeah, I have. I'm like, cool. So I just want to share this picture with you that I saw. Would you mind? She's like, okay. Like, and I always preface it with, hey, I'm just practicing hearing from God. I saw this picture of you and I just want to share it. I'm just a Christian. Just believe the Lord speaks today. And when I do that, it just diffuses everything.
Yeah.
People are like, sure.
Yeah.
And I shared what I saw, and she got kind of teary-eyed, and she was just like, wow, thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
She kind of was caught off guard. She didn't know what to
Planted
do.
a seed.
And planted the seed. And that happened when my wife was giving birth to a child. So sometimes it's the most random spots, but I didn't get there overnight. I mean, I had so many times where I would go and I would get it wrong. So I would go and I'm like, hey, sir, excuse me, are you by chance having any back pain? He's like, no, I don't have any back pain. Or, you know, hey, are you feeling this? And I would have an impression, it would be wrong.
Yeah.
But you have to learn, like everything else, you have to learn the difference between right and wrong.
That's right.
So you can pray for people. And tons of people I prayed for didn't get healed. And then some I did.
Yep.
So it all happens as you push forward. When you're developing any skill, there's the growing pains of it all.
That's right.
But the first time, that last story, the first time that I ever saw anyone healed is I was just leaving a friend's house and I was supposed to go one way and I actually went the other way, somewhere where I would never go. And I ended up in a Home Goods parking lot and I have no idea why. I just park and I'm like, why am I here? And I'd never seen anyone healed. I'd prayed for people and never really seen anything. And I just say, oh, let's go get some thank you cards. Yeah. So I go in and I'm like, just taking my time. And I go to the thank you card aisle. All of a sudden, there's a lady there. Within 2 minutes, she's telling me her life story. She has some sin. She has this nerve impingement, basically, where she's had this pain. She can't work. She can't drive. She can't sit. She can't stand. She can't really do much for any period of time. It's so bad that they were going to sear her nerves off. She had an appointment with the doctor to sear her nerves off in 2 weeks. And she's like, I just had to get out of the house. My friend drove me here, down the hill from Auburn. And I was like, oh, okay. And I don't know how it happened. It just happened. I said, hey, listen, your friend that came with you, she's here? She says, yeah. I said, hey, do you believe in God? She's like, I do. And I said, hey, does your friend believe in God? She says, yep. I said, hey, could you bring her here? She's like, okay. So she gets her friend. And actually I said, hey, I want to pray for you. Can you go get your friend? She says, yep. She gets her friend. Her friend's super skeptical, like, who's this weird guy?
Yeah.
And I said, hey, listen, I'm just Christian. I believe Jesus heals today. Your friend is in a lot of pain. I believe, and here's what's going to happen. We're going to pray together. We're going to join our faith together. We're going to pray and she's going to be healed. And after I said it, I'm like, that is like, who says that?
Who says that? Yeah.
That is no. Like, why would you say that? But I was sure.
Yeah.
And so
Belief.
I pray for her and I say, test your body out, do something you couldn't do. And no joke, she's standing up and she could barely get past her knees. And she just bends right over and touches her toes. And she just bawls.
Oh,
she
sure.
just sobs. She's like, I don't feel any pain.
Wow.
I have all my flexibility back. My legs feel strong. And she just cries, couldn't stop hugging me. And I'm just like, and even I'm like stunned, like, oh my gosh, like it really did get healed. And sure enough, I checked back with her later, 100% healed. Like,
that's incredible, dude. Wow.
That was the first time, right? So then that was when I realized how fun God is.
That's right.
How much
He
wants to see his people set free and healed. And that was what started it all.
Maybe that's some of the psychology why more and more comes, because there is that fun element and you're kind of chasing that excitement and that presence and that breakthrough for people to see other people to be healed and have that it makes you start looking for it more, right? Like the reticular activating system in your brain. So you start attracting that kind of stuff into your life more. And it was like a snowball rolling down the mountain. And I was just like, I don't know if this thing's ever going to stop. And it hasn't. I mean, it has hills and valleys, right? There's ebbs and flows, but that's really neat. So you mentioned something a few times that I want to bring up that I think is going to be really big for people and something that I would consider one of the best at that I've met personally, and something that literally changed my whole life. And you know where I'm going with this. Identity, right? You seem to know a lot about identity, and clearly you've done a lot of work and introspection and work in that area of your life. The process you took me through, and for those that are not familiar, I'll share this briefly, is I'm a business guy. I'm a networker. I'm a connector. Clearly, I know a lot of people, went to 12 different schools growing up. I've got thousands and thousands of people that I call my friend, right? Whitney's like, oh, one of your other friends, right? An endless amount of friends, right? And some of them are in thanks to our discipleship class, are in that 2 to 3, which would be you. Some of them are in the 5 to 7, some are in the 10 to 12, and or 7 to 12, and then outwardly and 100 to whatever that is, 215. I don't remember the numbers, but I have these friends in these rings, and you and I met at church in the lobby there, in the front lobby before we get into the sanctuary, and had a light conversation. And then somehow we ended up at lunch together, just I think over the weeks, different weeks and different events. And we're sitting at Pete's, and you asked me this, took me through this process. What is it called?
Oh, the 5-6-7?
5-6-7.
5-6-7 conversation method.
The
Joe
5-6-7.
Joe Stump, my real estate coach, came up with that.
5-6-7 conversation method. So he does this conversation method on me, and I'm like doing work with youth already and like doing all these different things. And he asks me a sentence, like give me a sentence and give me a word. I thought it was like 1, 3, 5, 7 or something, because you're like, give me a word, give me 2 words, give me 3, right? You took me through this whole process. And then I'm just sitting there having a normal conversation, answering his questions. And then he's like reading his paper, and he like looks at me and he's like, so it sounds like your purpose is to help at-risk youth and restore broken families. And I had no control or idea that it was coming. I just start literally sobbing, like crying, just uncontrollable, just tears. Because they say the best days of your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. And sitting with you in that restaurant in front of all those people, literally weeping with joy and just like excitement to like finally see my life, my purpose, and why I was created. And to have it come through a friend like you, just like created not just an amazing vision and purpose for my life and like gave me clear direction, but also bonded me, I feel, to you in a way that is way beyond this life and in this world. And so that process, for those that have never even heard of it or never gone through it, give me a little bit of a background of that you took me through, and kind of how that all came to be for you, so that maybe other people can be encouraged to start looking at their own identity.
Yeah. I actually, funny enough, I've never put the two together, that and identity are like the same or in the same
That's right.
lane. But what I would say is it's a skill, unlike many other skills. It's one of the most valuable skills I've learned.
Yeah.
And I've done it, hundreds of times at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But when I think one of the biggest gifts, and this is something else I learned from my coach Joe, like when you look at the biggest gift you can give to someone is your time, like is listening, is being present. And that's harder and harder. I just came from a lunch with a friend that was complaining about a friend, jokingly, that like he needed to call his friend and have a conversation, but then his friend made it about himself. All he wanted to do was talk the whole time. And I just think that that's the truth of a lot of people.
It's true.
That we have less and less good listeners, and we have more and more people that are just focused on themselves or focused on waiting for someone to finish talking so that they can get out what they want to get out.
That's right.
So that makes it challenging. But, you know, one of the main questions you ask in this method is, you know, what's important about X to you? So whatever it is that is important. So when faced with important decisions, like if you want to, let's say that your goal was to make 6 figures, like
That's right.
what's important about making 6 figures this year to you?
And now you're starting to bring it back for me.
Right. It frames it in a different way. Not why is it important to make it defensive, but what's important about. And so all I'm doing is making room for you to actually speak on what's important to you. And I understand how to document it and how to read it back to you and all that. It's a great skill, but like what you said was so important. It's when you find out what you were designed to do. And it just so happened that question at that time put together really gave you kind of a long-term purpose to look toward, you know, and that's, everybody has a purpose.
That's right.
And my purpose is to help people know the Lord, help people remove the trauma in their lives, know what they were designed for, and use their gifts for God. That's it.
Boom.
Like
There
plain
it
and
is.
simple,
Yep.
right? And that is a tool. That is a tool to do that. But we use that for any specific question. You know, like right now we're having trouble with the vaccines, right? Like,
Big time.
in order to go to school, now you have to have these vaccines. And so we can use it for that. We can use it for financial, entrepreneurial stuff. And, so it's a good tool, but nothing replaces like your relationship with the Lord.
That's right.
As far as learning your identity, because you can have all the tools in the world, but like if you don't have a relationship with the Lord, then that doesn't matter.
Exactly. Well, that's powerful. And when you were bringing that up, you'd ask me, okay, well, if you had this money, what would you do with it? And then that's what led me to like youth. And so like when you read that back to me, it was just so perfectly done, and the timing of it and how it just all happened was just like, God was it was just crazy how evident and undeniable he was. And that's a word I like to use a lot when it comes to my relationship with God, is just undeniable. It's like you see things, you witness things, whether it's praying for the lady in Walmart who's sleeping in her car and you have $20 in your wallet and you're freaking broke, and he's like, give it to her. And then you walk out and he's like yelling at you, like, stop. And you have to walk back in there and look around and pretend like you're actually looking for her. Then you walk back out and you stop again, and you go back in and you give her the thing, and she's like, oh my God, this is exactly what I needed to cover my stuff. And I just like, Lord just wants you to know he loves you, he sees you, and he cares for you, and he hasn't forgot about you. And it's just like, oh my God, can I hug you? You know, that kind of thing. Like those are things that they're unexplainable, they're undeniable, and they're life-changing. And it's a little addictive too, right, to be honest. And so I want to ask, if you were to challenge somebody that isn't a believer, right, that's watching this, that doesn't have the same walk that you do or I do, and everybody's walk looks different, right? Somebody doesn't need to be an evangelical, healing, speaking life, speaking tongues. The way they talk to God, the way God talks to them, the way they receive God and their relationship with God is very unique, right? Individual. So what advice, or what challenge, I should say, because that's one of the things I like to do here, is what's a challenge that you could give to somebody that they can go out and do today for somebody else to spread light, love, the Lord?
That's a real easy one, because I think some people see or hear stories or see what I do or see what other people do, and they're like, I could never do that. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because no one's going to be exactly like me.
That's right.
And I just want to make room for people to share their gifts. But when you look at a challenge, you could take the spiritual side out of it and just look at verbal and nonverbal cues. The challenge is, like, my challenge to you guys would be, find some random person and just either ask the Lord, if you have a relationship with the Lord, like, how do you want to love them? How do you want to bless them? How do you see them? Whatever question you want to ask. And then you just share what you hear. And trust me, you will hear. If you ask, you will hear. And there will be this moment where you're like, is that me or is that God? Just share what you hear. My wife's first word that she ever got was for a mom. They were playing with the kids at a park, and it was, you're doing a good job.
Wow.
That's it. You're doing a good job.
Simple.
So she goes over to a friend and she's like, hey, and she was super nervous. Hey, I don't really, this is really weird, but like, I'm practicing hearing from the Lord, and I just feel like he wants to tell you you're doing a good job. Crocodile tears.
Yeah.
Like she just lost it.
Yeah.
It was what she needed in that moment.
That's beautiful.
So if that's, you're like, I'll never do that, that's no problem. How can you do something kind for someone else? How can you see someone that's hurting? How can you just tell someone to have a nice day? Tell someone they have a nice smile? Tell someone you love their shoes?
That's right.
Like
a word of encouragement.
A word of encouragement. And either way, you are brightening someone's day. And if everyone did that a little bit more, we'd be in a good spot.
So that's your challenge, is to go out and encourage somebody, but specifically ask the Lord what it is that you want, that he wants you to encourage them on, or ask them what you want to, what they need, or how you can be there for them, or how you can support them. And like you said, you'll hear back. What are some of the practical ways that you see as, as a person that has your specific gift of healing? What are some other gifts that people may not even be aware of that they may have? And when they hear it, they go, oh, I have that. Maybe that is a gift from the Lord. What are some of the other gifts that you've seen that?
Man, when you talk about identity, this is a big one, because there's a lot of gifts that I've experienced, and I felt guilty for so long because I experienced so many.
Yeah.
So a gift that a lot of people have that they don't know is dreams. That's a really big one. When you have a lot of dreams, you might have recurring dreams. You might have dreams about specific people.
I'm one of those.
Yep. And so as you have dreams, there's the dreams, and then there's the interpretation of the dreams. So those are two separate gifts, like having dreams and interpreting dreams. The word of knowledge would be like if I knew someone had back pain, or I knew someone was feeling sorrow for some reason, that would be more like a word of knowledge. A word of wisdom would be something that, hey, if I have something that the Lord has given me to give you some form of wisdom in one way, shape, or form through my experience or through the Bible. But yeah, I would say those are the ones that I see the most.
Beautiful.
Is the dreams, the healings, the word of knowledge, and the other one would be discernment, I would say. And so what discernment is, you ever meet someone and in the first 5 seconds your skin crawls, like you feel like, I don't feel comfortable around this person. I don't know what it is. They seem really nice. That's discernment. That's actually a gift. You feel a pit in your stomach when faced with a decision, or there's something going on. That's actually the Lord speaking to you. That is discernment on, hey, maybe you need to take some more time and maybe consult more people, or those are things that people may say that, oh, it's something I ate, or hey, it's just my anxiety or whatnot. But the Lord is still going to try to direct you in the right path, whether you see it or not.
What's a trip about that one is that's Whitney's superpower. I mean, she's had that since I've known her, and I used to deny it all the time and be like, no, she's just judging. She's just this, she's just that. And she doesn't know this guy. And I look for the good and I see the potential and the goodness in people. And she's able to very easily see the other side of things and how quickly they could turn. And she's been right so many times now, where now when she calls it out, I'm like, yep. And even if she's wrong, I'm willing to play that side, because I know I'm going to be betting on black, and black hits a lot more than red does, right?
Yeah, I think the one thing, like just in closing, to really bring to the surface, like all of these things are great, helping people are great, but like everything is rooted in love. Like every single thing, they will know you are my disciples by your love.
That's right.
So everything you're doing, if you're doing it from a place of love, it can be very healthy and helpful.
Yep. Well, you're a super smart dude. I've really enjoyed building a relationship and having the friendship, and you being so intentional in seasons where I've just wanted to be left alone, and seasons where I've been, flaky, and all the different seasons of my life and our friendship together. I've appreciated your loyalty and your love that you've continued to pour into me and into my family. what I want to close this out on, what I'd like to know is, what does the future hold for Brandon? And you can incorporate your family in this, but I really want to know, like, for you and your life specifically, what does the future hold for you? What is your dream?
Man, there's no short answer.
No.
Real estate's my trade.
Yep.
So, been in real estate 13 years. We're now, we residential real estate in the greater Sacramento area, but we have that. We also have the investment side, flipping properties and
That's right.
and investing in real estate. But that's just a vehicle. That gives us the means to do more ministry and do more things with our family. I did for a while. My coach had asked me a question like, "Have you ever thought about the next 20 years?" And I'm like, I can't even think about tomorrow.
It's 2 weeks.
I didn't have 4 kids at the time, but I was like, there's no way.
Yeah.
I got way too much going on. And I just basically said, okay, Lord, if you want to show me the next 20 years, show me what my life looks like. And I went and I had a dream. And I had a dream of my life 20 years in the future. And I know it sounds crazy, but it was so clear that I got up and wrote it down word for word.
Wow.
20-year vision. And it's hard for someone like me because I'm like, once I have my mindset on something, I am full speed ahead. So it's hard for me to not take that on right away and move forward with it. But, it involved a coffee shop with a real estate office in it. It involved a community center called Family University, where we helped the community and gave back and helped marriages. And we had, probably 6 or 7 businesses. We had a gym. We had 6 or 7 businesses all in this commercial building, and I saw that, and it was like There's some times where you just know. Yeah. You just say, yeah.
It's a knowing.
That's going to happen. And so I don't know exactly what the future holds for everything. I mean, I'm going to continue helping, servicing, and loving my clients, and helping them in a transitional period of their life, but. We're going to continue to invest. We're going to continue to build.
That's right.
And we're going to continue to do ministry. I'd love to travel more than we do. We don't get to go travel with Agape as much. I mean, we've gone to great places like Brazil and Germany and Switzerland, but you
got a basketball team almost full of kids.
Exactly. So the goal would be to free up time to be able to do that more and take our kids.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, you heard his challenge, and I really want to encourage you guys to take action on that and actually make that happen and make that a reality. Is to ask the Lord to highlight somebody to you, to how you can serve, how you can be there for somebody, and watch the answer that you get back. I want you to report back to me. I want to hear about your story. I want to hear your testimony of what happened when you be swimming with the fishes, capiche? So that's going to conclude our interview, at least this one. I know you guys probably haven't heard this level of Jesus talk before. You get 2 Jesus freaks together, and this is just what you get. I know you guys are probably expecting something on the entrepreneurial path, and that'll probably happen in the future because this is not the last one we're going to do. But thank you guys so much for tuning in, listening to our stories, listening to our testimonies, and the breakthroughs that the Lord has brought us, and how we just run our lives through that filter of having a relationship with God. So I look forward to seeing you guys on the next episode. And as always, I'm Adrien Boyel, and keep looking up.
Came here to fill the void. I am love.